Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This is Grad School Buddy, a show that gives simple answers to questions about grad school. I'm your host, Ebele Chukwumoyi, a development economist and impact storyteller who has a master's from Georgetown University and a bachelor's from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. We hope the show helps you make better grad school decisions. Let's dive right in. In today's episode, we have a guest with us. He will help us demystify the application process from the point of view of a lecturer. I'll begin by reading his bio, and as usual, I'll turn it over to Mr. Ekene to tell us a few words about himself. Our guest today is Mr. Ekene Aguegboh, who is currently a Ph.D. student at Auburn University in the United States. He holds a master's degree from Michigan State University and the Durham University Business School, UK. He completed his bachelor's in economics from the University of Nigeria. He is also a lecturer in the Department of Economics at the University of Nigeria and a graduate research assistant at Auburn University. Ekene combines his academic background, research skills, and community service efforts in the planning and implementation of projects that promote economic, social, political, and environmental values in Africa and the world at large. So before I turn it over to Mr. Ekene, I just also want to say that I knew him because he was my professor in undergrad. And so it is such a huge honor to have you on this podcast this morning.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Ekene, like Ebele rightly pointed out. I am a grad student at Auburn University. Let me just start with some things that you might find interesting about me. I like to sing, at my leisure time. I also play the piano. And, when I'm serious, I just like to write, especially like research papers. Ebele used to be my student, but currently she's a friend turned sister even. And I was very honored when she invited me on her, podcast to come share my thoughts on certain things about grad school application. And I hope that you guys find it interesting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ekene, especially for telling us about the singing part, because I had no idea that you sing. I think your perspective is really going to be interesting for people, especially because, you have a dual view of the entire process. First, as a lecturer who has helped put together applications for people, especially in terms of writing letters of recommendation, and as well as somebody who is currently going through his PhD program. So I kind of wanted to get your dual perspective, and I thought that the community of listeners that we have will benefit from that. And so the first question that I have for you kind of aligns with your role as a lecturer at the University of Nigeria. So my question is, what would you like to see more Nigerian students do in terms of the grad school, whether it's in terms of their plans to grow academically, professionally, or otherwise?
Okay, good question. So what I would like to see Nigerian students do is one, is to have like a sense of purpose why they want to go to grad school. Grad school, in some sense, it's a means to an end. So if you graduate with your bachelor's, if what your life and career dreams are is about like going to industry or pursuing like a professional career or whatever, you might not really bother so much about grad school. But if, for example, you figure out that in your area, like in your limited academic area, say, for example, you are a chemistry major and you want to be a professor in the future, then grad school is where to, go to, because that's only where you can get that kind of training. So I think my first answer would be, why do you want to go to grad school? I know that there are other like peripheral reasons like Japa, or the fact that, we just, for some reason, Nigerians like to add more degrees, to our credentials. So yeah, and they're not like very bad reasons. But again, like you really need to know why you want to go. Like that sense of purpose is important, because if you are not well motivated about it, trust me, you might not find it very interesting. Like you might not, if you're not passionate about it, you might eventually like drop out, or you might give up on the way, because grad school is not like very easy, especially abroad. So why? Then secondly is, what second thing I would like to see is how prepared you are. Like if really this is something you want to do, which again goes back to you being passionate about it, then it would be nice to see that you are prepared. Like when I mean preparedness, like you've done some research about it. Of course, nobody expects anyone to know everything about grad school. I don't even know like everything. I just know enough to survive and go as far as I've gone. But then it would be nice to see that you've done some of your homework, and but it's easy to see the missing parts that you kind of need to fill in to get yourself to where you need to be. So yeah, first answer why, second would be preparedness.
Okay, thank you. That actually gives a very clear sense of what people should project as they meet people to be their referees. Number one, have a sense of purpose. Number two, do your homework. Thank you for sharing that. And so my next question is, when somebody discovers, okay, this is exactly where I want to be, maybe academia is the route for me, what would you, as somebody who has this experience, like given your experience so far, what do you think people, like what would you do differently if you were an aspiring applicant? Because I know it's true that you're in a PhD program now, but you've gone through the master's phase twice. So if you were advising somebody who is just applying the first time, what would your advice be to them?
That's a tricky question. First of all, I've gone through the master phase 3 times. So I had my first master's in UNN, second one in the UK at Durham University Business School, third one in Michigan State. So what I would do differently, if you take me like 8 years back when I started this journey, would be maybe to figure out that I needed to switch careers first than the fact that I needed a master's in my area. So I have always loved mathematics, which was what actually drove me to economics, because in my head, I figured early enough that economics was applied math. But again, even like when I got into economics, I would say that the area that interested me mostly was the part that had to do with data, like econometrics.
Yeah.
And it took me like so many years in grad school to find a way to pivot my career towards data science or IT, which is what I'm currently doing. I wouldn't say it wasn't an easy thing to do, because most times schools abroad would want you to have a background in IT, which I obviously did not have because my first major was economics, pure economics. But one of my master's degree was where I took advantage of one of my master's degree program to take classes in statistics and mathematics, like intense classes. Like I took classes in things like real analysis, complex analysis, linear algebra, topology even, and stats theory 1 and 2, all of that stuff. Anyway, but it was in that program that I got the skills that I would need to do what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now basically is I'm doing a 4th master's in data science and a PhD in applied economics. It's a lot to do. I wouldn't underestimate that. But I feel like the reason why I'm able to combine both fields is because I have a background already in like math, statistics, and now economics. So combining it now, you might think it's easy, but it's because of my background. Like I draw a lot from what I did in Michigan State and from my program in the UK and in Nigeria. So the first thing is, if, for example, if you find that you want to go to grad school and you want to like move away from what you did during your undergrad, I would say that, you need to like set out a plan on how to do that. As at when I was applying, I didn't know how to like switch. I knew I wanted something in the computer sciences, but making that switch was not clear to me because it was even an uphill task. finding full funding, So I know like when you're finding full funding, like my friends and I would play about it. I tell people this, I beg to apply. So at that point, you are at the mercies of the graduate application committee or whatever they are called abroad, So my catch then was get into the program first, get full funding. Like full funding was key. And with that, I didn't have much flexibility to tell them, oh, this is really what I wanted. I think I tried applying to one program in University of Aberdeen, financial mathematics, and they emailed me back saying that I didn't have enough background for that program. Not enough background for me to get in, but enough background for them to give me full funding, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what I'll do differently is maybe like have a shorter plan on how to pivot my career towards what I really wanted to do in grad school, which is, like data science, computer science-ish, IT, IT applied to public policy or economics, which is currently what I'm doing.
Okay, that's actually very interesting. And from what you've just said, I have questions for you that kind of pivot us away from, the questions I had about your role as a lecturer to you being a PhD student, even though I will still have questions about you being a lecturer. But you said something about, number one, how you're doing an MSc in data science and a PhD in econs. And I wonder how you're able to cope with the course load. Like, is this obviously this is not a combined thing. So how have you, I know you said you have the background and everything, but having, the past is important, but the present can also be backbreaking.
Yeah.
How do you cope with it right now? That's the first part of the question. And then the second part was that you said that getting full funding was something that was very important to you. And even when I was looking for scholarships, you gave me a lot of useful advice. And I know that you've won a lot of scholarships in your academic career. So I wondered if you have, some tips to give people. What was it about your application that you think stood out?
Yeah, so my current program, combining data science and applied economics, like two different programs. Trust me, it's a lot of work. I don't know that I sleep well at night, not out of worry, but out of the fact that I need to, like do well in both programs. I would say that how I'm able to combine it is the fact that, to be fair, I'm excited about what I'm doing. Don't get me wrong, I like economics, but I like economics when it is backed up by numbers, which is where data science comes in. So I don't do it like it's work. I do it because I'm passionate about it. And you know what happens, like once you are passionate about something, like you try to beat out 36 hours in 24 hours, if that makes sense. So like, I don't mind staying up late doing what I'm doing. I like the new skills I'm acquiring in SQL, in Python, in R. Before I came here, like those things used to sound like they were magic. They were things that were impossible to do, especially from my background. I mean, I have some level of skills and some skill sets in coding. Like I use Stata, Views, SPSS before I got here. But yeah, being able to move over to these very contemporary software packages that are useful for big data analysis, like it's something that I really wanted to do. So basically, I would just say it's the passion, because so many people get to ask me, it's a lot of work in the US to complete one program, and you are doing two concurrently. So I will also mention that my previous degrees, like my master's in UNN, I completed it when I was in the UK. My master's in the UK, I completed it when I was in the US. So I think somehow I've always been in these spaces where I'm always doing two things at the same time, two programs at the same time. So I guess that experience helped. Like, you know how they say, killing two birds with a stone. And I tell people that at times, if you try to kill two birds with a stone, one might die properly, the other one might not die, very well, but eventually it will get to that death.
Yeah.
So I'm using a dark example to explain this. But my point is, like once in a while, there are semesters where I would take I've taken up to 15 credits in a semester. what people take in the US every semester that they even find overwhelming is 9 credits. And I've had to do 15 credits. The only
Are there
thing
no
that,
limitations? Like, are there caps on number of credits you can take?
so for international students in the US, you can't take less than 9 credits to maintain your student visa. It's not there isn't a lot of wiggle room around that. You must take 9 credits.
Yeah.
I think if you are a local, you can take less than 9, but people find that 9 like they find it like you're doing too much even already. So you can imagine me doing 15 credits, but it comes usually at a cost. Of course, like I told you, I don't remember sleeping well at night for the past 2 or 3 years. Like I always have to cut short my sleep, you know. Then secondly, I would say that sometimes a course or two might suffer. So there are semesters where, I've smashed straight A's in those 5 classes. At times I get like, 1B once in a while, which is fine. It's not, it doesn't bother me. Like I feel like if I'm doing what I'm doing and the cost of it is that out of maybe 30 classes, I make only B's in 4. That's fine, because already I'm doing too much.
You actually when you said some classes will suffer, I'm like, they will suffer.
Yeah, but when I say
and you're
suffer,
like B.
I get like there are instances where I've been lucky. I think my last semester, like I had A's in all my classes. Then there are sometimes I'll just make like a B in one and A's in the others. And for me, it's fine. So that's how I would say like I've been able to combine it, which brings me to that metaphor that I say that, trying to kill 2 birds with a stone, one would die properly, then the other one might be in coma, which is, my classes. Some of them I kill them like properly. Then some I don't do that. I don't do as much as I would have done if I was like focusing on just 9 credits, which is like 3 classes. As regards getting full funding for my program. So first of all, let me not make it seem like I have money and then I'm looking for full funding.
Yeah.
I don't come from money, My family is not really, in fact, they don't even have enough to send anybody to school, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah.
So my first degree was funded by me. I did what Americans would call an associate degree in accounting. So I went to a polytechnic in Nigeria where I self-funded myself. Then I got a banking job and saved up for my degree program. So I've always needed money for school, and I've always known that scholarships would help because school is a lot of work. So after my first degree, I think during my first degree even, I secured a few scholarships. I know that I was a recipient of Ghana Fawemi scholarship at some point. Then I also was a recipient of scholarships from Living Faith Church, because that is where I worship. Then when I finished, I was one of those people that P2B dashed 1 million naira for getting first class. But people mistake it that he dashed out.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, he gave us 1 million to further our education. He was particular about it because he was like, yeah, maybe that's why I am obedient. So I used that money to fund my master's degree in University of Nigeria. Then during my degree program, I figured out that like I wanted to get some grad school experience abroad. Yep, and that bettered my journey to applying for schools. As at the time, I made about 34 applications with 34 scholarships, So I remember I applied to 33 schools in the UK and just 1 school in the US. So I think I secured about 5 or 6 of them in the UK, and the one in the US, I also secured admission into the programs. Then I got Commonwealth scholarship for the programs I applied for in the UK. And Commonwealth scholarship is like a comprehensive scholarship. They pay for your flight tickets, they pay for your tuition, they give you a stipend every month, they fund your trips for workshops, they pay for books, they pay for clothing, for winter clothing, basically. So it's comprehensive. I also secured Chevening scholarship the same year, but I opted for Commonwealth, and that was how I went to Durham University. So it was fully paid for. But what I did was, because I knew that the UK masters might be fast enough to finish, like, because I knew I could finish it in 1 year, I deferred my admission in the US, which at the time was at Michigan State University. So I deferred my admission there. And as soon as I was done with my coursework in the UK, I reached out to Michigan State University and I applied for MasterCard scholarship. Fortunately, I was awarded the scholarship for a master's program. So as soon as I ended my coursework in the UK, I transitioned to the US. And while I was in the US, I completed the research component of my UK master's degree in the US. Then I now continued my MasterCard training, which was a master's at Michigan State, which I completed in 2019, 2020, after which I moved to the Auburn University. So, like I told you, I don't come from money. So for me, like, getting funding for this, and schooling abroad is not easy when it's coming from your pockets, no matter how rich your parents are. I mean, unless you are one of those people who have what Ebele would like to call egumbute. But I don't have it.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
So Michigan State University, as soon as my master's was coming to an end, I started applying for funding. And at this point, I want to differentiate. I think Nigerian students especially confuse scholarships and funding.
Yeah.
So scholarships or fellowship, like, they award you like this fellowships or scholarship, and they don't put the condition of you working for the university, in the agreement. So, but there are other conditionalities that can be placed on you, like maybe going back to your home country to spend some time or give back, which is something that Chevening was big on. Commonwealth also does that, but Commonwealth is more flexible, especially if you're in the academia, So my program in the UK, I did not have to work for the university to, get that funding. However, they have like CGPA requirements. You can't get less than like an upper credit or something to remain in the program. Same thing with MasterCard scholarship, But here at Auburn, like, what I have here is funding in the form of assistantship. So here I have to do research 20 hours every week to maintain my funding, as well as maintain like good academic standing in my program. So that's the difference between funding, like, looking like full funding from North American universities or UK universities as against fellowships or scholarship. Scholarships, you don't need to work for them. You just apply, and you are usually selected based on some criteria, maybe on merit or the fact that you are from Africa, and the scholarship is for people only in Africa, like the MasterCard. Commonwealth is for countries that are members of the, Commonwealth of the UK and all of that. So, yeah, but for funding, I think it's open to everybody around the world. They have things you have to meet up to get those funding. So, yeah. So I've had both at some point in time.
Okay. So first of all, Mr. Kenny, I just want to say that you have a lot of experience. And I know that when people look at this from outside, it seems like, oh my God, this is so fancy. He gets all these things because he's very smart and he is hardworking. But I think what people fail to see is, number one, you just shared with us that you applied to 34 schools and 34 scholarships, and you heard back from 5. So I think one thing that's really important to point out to our guests, to our listeners at this point, is also the need to do kind of the background work that nobody really sees. And also, like, to understand that the application phase is a number game. But also to summarize all the points that you have given us about how you've coped with balancing both your master's degree and your PhD degree. You talked about passion and how you wish, you had pivoted your career earlier or faster. And so that's one thing I can also attest to the fact that when you're passionate about something, you're willing to put in as much time. Also, you were very honest with us about the cost that it comes with, especially the cost of lack of sleep, which I think a lot of people tend to underestimate. And then about funding, you also gave us a perspective that nobody has ever actually shared on this podcast, which is that scholarships are different from getting funding. Because I think people do not really understand that sometimes, assistantships mean that you have to also play a role or a part in the university that has accepted you. Okay, so Mr. Kene, now with this information that you've shared, I would like for us to again gravitate towards your role as a lecturer. If people were to take all the advice that you've given them now, or if our hope is that, people take like 60, 70% or even 100% of everything that we say, what would you say is an ideal future? Like, what would you want as a professor? Like, if you see your students who you've taught in 10 years' time, who have decided to go through this entire grad school process, what's an ideal future that you would say you'd like to see for them?
Okay. First off, I would really want them to be successful. Trust me, I've had instances where some of the people I recommended or people I supported or even people I mentored have had to like drop out of school, abroad, like reasons, which includes losing their fundings or not meeting up with their academic requirements of their scholarship or their funding. So one, I would like them to be successful. But secondly, I really, really think that as people who are coming from a country where we have like a very young population, which is still growing, I would like to see a lot of us do more to help others back home. I remember that when I was applying for the MasterCard scholarship, they asked me, in what ways do I feel I can use the MasterCard scholarship to give back? And I told them that, one thing about education is it has a multiplying effect, right? So you help one person and the person helps like 10 other people and 10 other people help like 10. So you see that compounding effect that it has. And I told MasterCard that at times you can't even measure like the impact you've had just, like funding a single scholar, who is committed to really giving back. So I think that, one of the things I would like to see applicants do, like people who have gone through the phase, and have succeeded, is to be able to give back. Let me say something that I've observed. In my different programs, I've been exposed to people from different cultures.
Yeah.
And one thing that have stood out for me is Asian students. When I say Asian, I am particular about people from India and from China.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I noticed that somehow there is some form of informal mentoring going on within their circles.
Yeah.
People, I know that we all have the impression that they are smart, and trust me, they really are smart. But I also know that they thrive from that community of support that they've created for themselves, And to be fair, in the scheme of things, Asians are better off than Africans, Their economies are growing better than ours. You can see most of them are heads of industries in the US. The IT firms, most of the CEOs now are Indians and the rest. And I think that is something that we can also aspire to be as Africans. What we just need to do is that sense of community, and I say this mostly because most times we see ourselves as competitions other than a community, So I would really, my dream for students, both in the future, is that we have that community where people thrive, where people can draw from to better their lives, especially because like back home, our governments don't do enough to encourage us to, enroll in these programs abroad. Back in the day, there are lots of funding opportunities for people, especially people who are talented, to go abroad to study. But these days, those opportunities are kind of dwindling down because of economic hardship, and issues of corruption and all of that. So in the end, we have only ourselves to help. Like nobody's going to do it for us again. So I just feel like we need to build that community where people can tap from. I have tried to do as much as I can. If people reach out to me, I offer help or advice as much as I can offer. You get. So that would be what I would say is an ideal future that I hope that would materialize, for African students or Nigerian students.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Mr. Kene. So also, as usual, to summarize, you said that one of the things you love to see for your students in the future, you would love for them to be successful in their programs, but you also love for the people who have gone through this phase to kind of create a community. And I know that you shared a little bit about why you think it's been a little bit tricky to kind of create these communities. But I know that it's something that I have also struggled with here, like where I live. I feel like people are willing to meet online, right? But how do I put this? It's not really the same. And so if you could do something differently to help the community of people here, because I think the problem is the coming together. Like, who is going to call people to come together? But I might be wrong. So what do you think that people who have gone through this phase can do differently to help this community building? Whether it's in terms of organizing or it's in terms of willingness to meet people outside their circles?
A good response would be exactly what you're doing now, Ebele. Like this is something that, I mean, you don't know who is listening to this, and you don't even know at what points in their lives they are listening to it. So there might be one or two ideas they will pick up from your podcast, and that would be one thing or two things that will change everything about the application. So first of all, I feel like online, like all these social media, platforms, they are really, really useful. I know that you float these on Spotify and other platforms, and I'm aware you are not the only one doing this. I have friends who host Twitter pages where they talk about opportunities abroad and all of that. So like these are like good ways to reach out to people who are aspiring and people who are like not in close proximity with us. But then for those that are in the same spaces as we are abroad, I feel like for example, one thing I think would help is if you're in a program in a particular university, like one thing you can do is as you go through your classes, like it would be really helpful if you would organize your materials, your resources that you used every semester for every class in a way and put them in a drive and just save them there. You never can tell whose life you'll be saving. One day you might have a Nigerian, or not even a Nigerian, anybody, even if he's white or Asian, that might need help, and you just, oh yeah, I have this, for this class, I have the materials I can share with you. You can start reading in advance so that you know what to expect in the class and all of that stuff. So I feel like, these efforts are things that, could help somebody thrive here. Also, I feel like if you see somebody who just got here, even, helping them overcome, the weather shock, helping them overcome cultural shock, and even academic shocks, because the academic system in North America is different from the system in the UK and in Africa. So even like telling them that, oh, like these classes, like even if you put the fear of God in them, so like these classes, you need to go to school every day to keep up. If you're in a PhD program, there are qualifying exams that if you don't pass, you get kicked out. So you have to like sacrifice your first 1 year to really get in that exam, doing well in that exam or passing it, so that after that 1 year, you can relax and start doing your research or playing around with classes. So, giving those words of advice than just ignoring somebody, or, you see a fellow Nigerian and the first thing that comes to your mind is, we are not from the same ethnic group, then you ignore the person. I don't think it's a good way to go. If you meet people, just like have a conversation and see if there are places where you could help them. You know, like I can tell, you know how you go to go and help somebody and you realize in the end that you're the one who needs the help, not the person. So
Yeah.
it can happen that way. So I'll just say that one way to go about is to keep having conversations with people. That's the only way you would find, where you guys have strengths or weaknesses that can be shared together and overcome together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes 100% sense. Thank you so much for sharing. And also something else I picked up when you were talking about your previous point about what you wanted and what you wanted for your students was the fact that you were talking about the fact that, in the past, there were so many scholarships that people could apply to if they wanted to school abroad, and how the scholarships have started dwindling. And I think the other part of that coin is, like, back in the day, like, Nigeria used to be a destination for academic and professional pursuits. Do you ever think like we'll go back to those days where, number one, on one end, it's like there becomes more education finance for people who want to study abroad, but then in the same vein, there is also that opportunity for exchange programs where people from abroad can come to our Nigerian universities. As a lecturer teaching in Nigeria, do you think, can we ever return to those days?
Anyway, I like the fact that you narrowed down this question to Nigeria, because I don't want to speak for other countries or Africa at large.
Yeah.
So I think right now where things are, let me not even go to economy. Let me just stick to the education sector in Nigeria. I think right now we have hit rock bottom. And the only thing that can happen is that things can only get better, because, like a lot of changes, negative changes have, flooded the system. Lecturers are not well paid. There isn't proper infrastructure. Like, you don't even have like appropriate labs for the hard sciences, like chemistry, physics, and the rest. And I feel like that is also responsible for the ongoing strike or industrial action in Nigeria by ASU. And I'm happy that they are going in the direction. I mean, I don't want us to debate politics here, but I feel like ASU has a point in what they are clamoring for.
Yeah.
And hopefully they get it. But I overheard the chairman of ASU saying that, like, there's a huge brain drain going on. And when people hear brain drain, the first thing that comes to their mind is even like young people who are students leaving, forgetting that lots of academics are also leaving. I have colleagues who have left the university, and I don't even see them coming back, not because they hate to come back, but because they don't feel like they can maximize their potentials in their field if they return back to Nigeria. So I would say that I hope that we go back to those glory days. I don't see that happening as soon as possible, but I feel like it's a possibility. One thing is, I don't think people around the world realize it, but Nigerians are very, the term would be, we are very schooled people. Like, we aspire to go to school a lot.
Yeah.
And if not for anything, like, one thing we are sure that would grow over the years is human capital. Especially, maybe not human capital means education and health, but I'm sticking to education this way. And if you have a lot of manpower in the education sector abroad, of course, not everybody would want to even stay abroad, as exciting as it is now because of how bad things are back home. Now that in the future you have people, even like people who are probably in their retirement age, or people who are even young, who feel like, oh, I just want to go back home. I feel more comfortable staying at home. You have that happen. Like, it might not be foreigners coming back home to go to school, but you have a lot of academics outside of Nigeria coming back to Nigeria to actually teach or give back. And if that begins to happen, then what happens is that quality will start growing, like the quality of education will start, improving. And then and again, I think there's also a part we are missing, the fact that academics who have traveled abroad and joined foreign universities, if they have all these agreements with universities back home to go back and teach once in a while, then that leaves it open for collaborations between universities, because they can engineer like things like exchange programs between two universities, which is something that we might be seeing if that happens. If we have like those academics abroad who are also willing to part-time come to Nigeria, come to teach once in a while, you see those exchange programs come back, and hopefully, we'll get back to the glory days that we lost over time.
Okay, so that was a very interesting perspective, especially the fact that you rightly noted that even though things might not seem 100% full of sunshine right now, there is a future where, there's still a possibility for collaboration between people who still have part-time positions in Nigeria and their universities in other countries. And another question that I have for you, in line with the thoughts that you have shared, both in terms of the brain drain from both the student perspective and the lecturer's perspective, is how do you think that the academic community perceives this brain drain, both from the terms of departments who are losing very skilled, very smart people who have decided to go to other institutions for very varying reasons? How is the academic community in Nigeria perceiving this?
That's a good question. I've had conversations with my colleagues back home, and what I would say I understand from their impression about what's going on is that there is a mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, they are excited that their students are going abroad and doing well. That is one way to validate the fact that somehow, no matter how bad things are in Nigerian university, they also provide some level of preparedness for these students, because again, even when the students go abroad, they do well. It might not stem from strong academic background, but I would say it is an indicator that they are well trained to face more difficulty. The Nigerian system is it's very tough to survive in the Nigerian academic system. So when you come abroad, and when I say tough, not due to toxicity, but maybe because of the fact that there are lack of resources, and all of that. So imagine that kind of student going to a place where there are resources, and you've already survived a place where you lacked resources. You naturally just flourish, right? Yeah. So I think there is that excitement on the one hand. Then on the other hand, some people feel like we're also losing our best to the West, which in some sense is true. Because you have I don't know of any student who was top of their class during my program that is still in Nigeria currently. Everybody is abroad. It doesn't mean that those who are back in Nigeria are not good enough, but you want to actually have your best around, right?
Yeah.
Because somehow they help, everybody strive to be like them, and it makes everybody better off. Then you are not losing them abroad, and you don't even know that they want to come back for the training. Some countries abroad too are already they are designing immigration policies to assimilate these people that benefit from their trainings abroad.
Yeah.
So you see all that compromising the possibility of them going back to Nigeria to give back or to continue their career back home. So the answer would be there are mixed feelings. For me, my unique perspective would be, I don't think there is anything wrong. For me, the net benefits outweighs the net cost, because when people travel abroad, there's no way you will lose all of them. When I say lose all of them, even if they pursue, stay or residency in these countries, somehow, people always find ways to give back. It might be through, grants, through collaborations. I think there was this medical doctor that is currently trending who gave the University of Ibadan Medical School about $1 million.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, so nobody knows how long that guy has left. Has been away, sorry. And people would assume that he's a loss to this system. But do you know what $1 million is in Nigeria? you know how much it can do for the medical school. So
Yeah.
I don't think the net benefit is below the net cost. I feel like in the end is a win-win for both sides.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mr. Kinney. And then I have a few questions, like, but I'm curious about what the hardest part about being a Nigerian lecturer is, especially because you're a younger, and I'm using my hand to do quotation mark. But like, you're one of like the younger lecturers. When I was in school, you were, how do I put this? It's like a lot of us had older brothers and sisters, right? And so it's like I would go to school and see like my elder brother or sister in my class, being a serious person trying to teach me something about economics. And so I know the view that I had from that perspective about, okay, like these are my lecturers. But then I wondered what the hardest part about being a young Nigerian lecturer is, especially about having to mentor people. Do you ever feel like, what is the emotion that comes from that? Do you ever feel like, okay, yes, like it's just basically how do you feel about it, and what is the hardest part about it?
So it's a good question, and I guess that the fact that I was in that position gives me unique perspective to shed light on it.
Yeah.
The trickiest part is being able to strike a balance between my relationship with my fellow colleagues who are like older people and my relationship with students who are as young as I was, if that makes sense. So on the one hand, I get to attend these meetings, I get to interact, both formally and informally with probably professors who taught me, who taught Charles Soludo, who mentored Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, there's that air of superiority, that air of, the fact that they are older, they are more experienced, they are more exposed. In fact, there's the fact that they give you your grades in school as well, like they taught you. Then, on the other hand, there's the fact that now, you're also having to teach people who are in your age bracket, if that makes sense. So yeah, that balance is always tricky. And why I say it's tricky is there are instances where I would have to, I will have to maintain multiple hats. So I have this mask I wear when I'm with, my senior colleagues. Then when I'm with students, I have this other mask I wear. And at times, it feels like everything is acting because you're like, so what is now left for the real Mr. Kenneth to now be himself? And yeah, and that's very, very tricky. At times again, like the marks tends to overlap because maybe I'm in the mood where I want to like talk to students who are as young as I am, and we talk about things that young people want to talk about, right? Then you have your senior colleague bump it to your office so that you guys would grade a paper. And then you have to put on these straight face and tell them, so now I need you guys to leave because I want to work. That would be the tricky part. But it's not so bad. If there's one thing it does, it helps you to grow up really fast because that is how real life is. If you are with family, the level of how relaxed you are is different from when you're at your workplace or when you are with friends, or like, it's like when you're sending a text message to your friends and you also have to answer an email to your boss, that the tones are kind of different. So it's an experience that was useful for my future, mostly because it helps you to like learn quickly how to read a room. It helps you to know how to maintain decorum in different cycles. Like what would be maintaining decorum in a staff meeting is not the same thing it would be when you are with students, And one thing I tried to do is, with students, I tried my best. I know that my students listening might not agree, but I tried my best to really be cordial. I tried my best to be friends with them. I tried my best not to put that air of, I'm a lecturer and you're my student and all of that. Yeah, I hung out with them. I'll go to the bar with them, we'll drink once in a while. Again, I also tried to, put boundaries because these things can get out of hand quickly. And with my senior colleague, I give them their well-deserved respect. Also, there are instances where I disagreed with them respectfully. And I know that on very few occasions, some of them express concerns about how I related with students. When somebody is older and they're like, now you're a lecturer, so you need to be more mean, you need to be more, yeah. And I told them that I don't think that is me. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to abuse my job, but I will try not to. But I don't also think that I want to start acting older than my age, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What matters is that I do my job and I do it to the best of my ability. It's not, I don't think wearing straight faces and being mean is going to help me achieve that. I mean, for some people it worked. But for me, I felt like being myself, would help me get there better. So I hope that answer makes sense.
It did. It absolutely 100% did. I understand how tricky human relationships can be, and I appreciate you sharing how you've been able to kind of enforce boundaries and kind of find a way to be Mr. Ekene in both instances. Okay, so I will have only two last questions. No, actually, one is a random question that I like guests. One is a random advice that I like guests to just give at the end of the show. But I have two major questions for you. So I'm sure sometimes the students, especially that you have eventually become friendly at towards, have approached you to be their recommender. And I'm sure it's not everybody who asks you to be their referee that you say yes to. So my second to last question for you is, number one, have there been instances where somebody asked you, will you be my referee? And you said no. And what is it that the person did or what was it about the person's character that made you realize, I can't stand in for this person? Because I think that will also help people avoid common mistakes. So if you could, kind of phrase it as, what are some common mistakes that people can make that makes it difficult for people to want to act as their referee, what would you say?
For starters, I think that the people who encountered me as a lecturer, I don't know, but I feel like they have the impression that I'm very, what's the word? I'm very objective, for lack of a better word. But I think the word I had in mind first was I'm strict. Like, I wouldn't recommend you for something I don't think that you are worthy of. I think they all know that I am like that to start with, Then, of course, the few instances where I get requests that I'm skeptical about fulfilling. Normally, what I do is I would advise them to find somebody else to recommend them. So, if, for example, you approach me to recommend you to a very competitive program that I feel like, one, I probably don't have enough to say about you. Let me not say I don't have anything good to say, but I don't have enough. That's how I like to say it. I would usually advise you to meet somebody who probably, like, if you took my classes only, I don't feel like that is the only thing graduate schools want to hear about you. So I'll tell you, why not reach out to your project advisor? And because the person can say a few things, I'm hoping that the person must have taught you. But beyond that, the person have done research with you, have communicated with you more personally as your advisor. So what I'll do is I'll refer you to that person. If you want, I'm very happy to even make phone calls on your behalf and talk to my colleagues that I know to provide that recommendation. Then something else I also encourage people to do is, I don't even do it as at the point where I'm recommending, even while in school, and I'm sure Abela, you know this, I always tell people, academics is not entirely for everyone. I say this not from a place of the fact that people are not smart or people are unintelligent, but I would always tell my friends that there are two kinds of people in this world. I don't think anybody is dull. There are people who are interested in things, and there are people who are interested in people. So if you are in school, and most times what we do in school, what we call, let me say STEM. STEM mostly has to do with things, Physics is about, like mass, weight, all those things. Chemistry is about, of course, chemistry and all of that sort. And these are like things. So if you're not somebody who gravitates towards those kind of things, then, and you are in a field that requires you to know those things, I will tell you that while you are in college or in the university, try and get a more rounded experience. So be more involved in community service, be more involved in student organizations, be more involved in things that we consider extracurricular. And I say it, I'm sure in class I've said it more than once to students. Yeah, don't allow your life to revolve around economics. Go out of your field, because eventually what you might do after school might not even be economics to start with.
Yeah.
So if you approach me and I realize that you are that kind of person, so I wouldn't say that you are not smart. It's just that you are probably not interested. You don't have the flair for what you're applying for. Let me put it that way. I'll ask you, try and join NGOs, try and, do other stuff outside of your field, so that if somebody is putting in a letter of recommendation, and I've done it with some people, so that maybe a year from now, when I am writing you a letter, I will put in letter that, I am aware that, this person was part of the community development CDS program for NYSC, as regards anti-corruption or blah, blah, blah. And this is what you did. And this is the project that you did, blah, blah, blah. So if I add that component to, and this student took my class and was in the top 40% percentile or whatever, it says that you are not the best in your class, but there are other things about you that are wonderful that private schools will want to know, because it tells them that you can cultivate a healthy relationship with your professor, with the university community. Some people come here and they become so big, like with student unions and with student organizations, that is their path. And from there, before you know, they get recommendations to be student counselors and the rest. So everything does not boil down to grades. So I guess my answer in summary is that I don't think anybody is undeserving of recommendation. What I do is I find a way to help you build something that you can be recommended for, if that makes sense.
It does. Okay. So you said that you try as much as possible to make it such that you point out to people how they can have stronger application and stronger points for their reference letters, and where you feel like you stronger applications / reference letters for the future, but where you feel like you don't have enough context or know enough to write enough about the person, you try to also connect them with people. Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Mr. Kenny. And my final question is, in Nigeria, you're a lecturer and your colleagues are lecturers like yourself, some of whom have taught, a lot of all these very cool people that we as economists also look up to, Okonjo-Iweala, for example. And in America, you're a Ph.D. scholar and, your colleagues are scholars like yourself. So how do you manage both identities, especially because I'm sure that there are students who still wish, so it's like, at every point in time, it feels like you're in two different headspaces, one where you have to be a lecturer and one where you have to be a scholar. And how do you balance them both?
Okay, good question. So I would say that essentially I have always been in a position where I'm a student and also a lecturer. So that is even all I know. I remember one time when I was not running, I think when I was recently employed by UNN, back in the day, because I felt like all I do was teach and do research, I wanted to enroll into the music department for a diploma. Because I also just wanted a space where I can sit down and listen to somebody teach me, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always liked that that experience. And I've liked it because it's very humbling, right? So I feel like, it's a good way for you to realize that you don't even know everything, not even about your field, but about even things in life. And I say this because I feel like in Nigeria, both lecturers and students, believe that lecturers are at the point where they are not supposed to, like, they know everything, so they're not supposed to learn. I feel like that's like one very big illusion that we need to, dismantle. If you come here to the West, you will see like lecturers in class, they are very, you will see somebody even come. I had a professor in Michigan State who would come to teach us real analysis. And he told us that he honestly does not know how to solve this proof. Is there anybody here who has an idea? And that's what it is. And at times you see some very smart students come on the board and do the proof. And that is how learning should be. And even know what I admired mostly about this particular professor. For over 10 years, he got the award of best research paper in a particular field in economics. So he is not dull, he's super smart.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that he could come to class and humbly tell you that this proof. Now, I don't have an idea how we should start. That is anybody here who knows? And I'm not saying it because I think he pretends. He will say it in class and be quiet for 5 minutes. So it will be so dull that if you actually know how to do it, you have to come and
say
help.
That you can, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So, and I feel like that is how learning should be, right? Because, all these I think in Igbo, we like to call it Okachamara perspective. It doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't help. I remember one time I went back to Nigeria to teach a class in macro, and I was trying to explain, I think it was overlapping generation model. I was trying to explain it to students in class, and for some reason they weren't just getting it. Then one student in class, and that student particularly right now is in the UK doing a Ph.D. at University of Liverpool.
Okay.
And he raised up, he was like, that he thinks that this. And I realized that he was explaining it better than I was.
Yeah.
And I called him up, okay, come and take the marker and explain. Everybody found it weird in class. In fact, what I did was, as I gave him the marker, I sat on his seat. Because there's nothing wrong with it. The fact that he's teaching it doesn't take away my, CGPA from me.
Yeah.
So I just feel like, there's nothing wrong with being a scholar and being an academic adult. In fact, if anything, that is how things should be. Lecturers should continually improve themselves. And by so doing, nothing stops you from coming to class and saying, I don't think I don't think I understand how to start this. Or I don't think I know how to do this. Is there anybody here who probably has an idea how to do it? Some of my students have become collaborators over time. Because, there are things I realize that they know better than I do. And, all we do is, how does the Bible say it? Iron sharpeneth iron, right?
Yeah.
I bring my strength and they bring their strength, and we are both better for it in the end, So that's how I see it.
Mr. Kinney, I told you that was my last question, but you keep giving me more. Because so my next question for you, and this will honestly be the last one, is for lecturers who are, they're actually trying to be more open and more honest and kind of inculcate this notion of being constant learners. How would you say that the students will perceive it? Do you think students will look at you and think, this person doesn't even know what they're saying? Or how would you advise, young lecturers like you who are kind of close to the age of the students that they teach to control circumstances like this, to ensure that things like this don't then become an avenue for insult, if that makes sense, or to be for bans, as we like to say these days?
So I feel like what lecturers owe students is not just, knowledge, so to say. I feel like, it's also an opportunity for community service. When we throw these words around, like community service, institutions, that people think that there are things that are hard to grasp. They are, utopian ideas. But community service means, in this sense, it can mean letting the student realize that the fact that I am teaching you does not mean that I know everything. There is even a possibility that there is some aspect of what I'm trying to teach you that you probably know more than I do.
Yeah.
And even if a student comes to class and is misguided from home or from his or her background, seeing you repeat that thing, over time, sends, you don't know, but there are all these subtle signals that it sends to people. I know one time I was taught econometrics in Michigan State by Woodridge. And we all know who Woodridge is in econometrics, right?
Yeah.
You can imagine hearing Woodridge to tell you, this question that I asked, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. You realize that in your entire lineage, it is possible that they will never give birth to anybody who will be as smart as Woodridge in econometrics. But for him to come to class and acknowledge that in front of you is a very humbling experience, because you now realize that this knowledge thing, everybody is striving to be better at it. Like, people are trying to learn more, right?
Yeah.
Even how to learn is even part of the knowledge system. And that's what I think is the answer to the question, that students need to realize that there is a good way to learn and there's a very bad way to learn. So coming to class and waiting for your lecturers to make mistakes so that you laugh at them is a bad way to learn. Because whether you laugh at them or not, you don't take away from their accomplishments, do you? You don't.
Yeah.
And you are there to make the best and the most out of that opportunity. So I don't know what reward you get by laughing at somebody for not knowing what you think they should know, but you forget that he or she knew enough to get that job in the first place. And you are even still undergoing training to know enough to graduate. That's a huge gap. So so for me, I just feel like part of our job as academics is not just to teach students about concrete, disciplines or sciences, all of that. We also owe them teaching them morals and all those things, if that makes sense.
It does. It really, really does. Thank you. I was just curious to know your perspective and how you've managed to navigate, feeling like that, or thoughts like that, or even circumstances like that. And for people who do not know, Woodridge is he's like the god of econometrics.
Yeah.
And he wrote this introductory to econometrics textbook that I think a lot of economists around the world must have encountered at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So the fact that such a person will come to class and admit that, I really don't know this, you would appreciate the fact that it's coming from him, and it's not an opportunity for you to laugh at Woodridge. You can't even laugh at Woodridge to start with in econometrics. That's just how I see it.
Okay. One thing I really loved about this interview is that, number one, you told us about mentorship and community building, not just theoretically, but how even you have managed to practicalize it. And you've shared ideas with us that other people can also kind of look to as they think of what they could do to help or grow the community of people who are looking to go to grad school. I also really appreciate that you were very honest and objective in everything that you said. And you're obviously a very brilliant person, even though I don't know, you like to downplay it a lot, Mr. Ikene.
I don't know what you mean by that.
You're doing an MSc in data science and a PhD in economics. That's all I have to say about that. But I also love that you shared dual-faceted information about, your perspective as a lecturer and a PhD scholar. And so before I turn it to you to give us a random advice, just any random advice about anything at all, it can even be about the cosmic universe. What would you tell people, like for people who are looking to find you, maybe people who are looking to collaborate with you in future? Is there anywhere that they can find you, whether it's on LinkedIn or on any other social media app? And what random advice do you have for our listeners?
As regards reaching me, trust me, emails are the best way to reach me. I'm not very good with social media. I mean, I'm on these platforms, but I hardly engage. Not because I don't like to. It's too much noise. Like in my head, I have a lot going on in my head. Too much noise in my head for me to come and extrapolate more noise from the external, which is how I see this social media. Like when I go to Twitter, I just feel like I'm reading 17 textbooks at the same time. There's somebody who is ranting, that one I see like a textbook in psychiatry sciences. There's somebody who is there making sense. I see like,
Yeah.
there's somebody there doing philosophical. So I just chose to, engage only when I don't even think I engage to even start with. I just my level of engagement is to read once in a while and just follow up with the news and all of that. So emails work for me. My personal email is Stephen with the PH dot Kene as KENE at gmail.com. If you shoot me an email, I always respond. I like emails very well because they are very formal. It's easy to share resources like PDF files or MS documents there. If I have anything I want to like explain, anything I wanted to explain to me, it's very easy to share it on that platform. It's also very short, right? Like you won't put in an email and start asking me about my mother or my father, so it's very objective. You know how if you say, oh, send me a text message, the person will feel, oh, let me create common ground first. Email, the etiquettes of emailing does not allow for that ground. Just go straight to the point, and I would go straight to the point in responding as well. And trust me, I'm not, what's the word? I'm not an obnoxious person in responding. Like, yeah, if something is like this, I'll say the way it is, So don't feel like, oh, if I don't establish that common ground, he might not be open. Nope. The one thing that you might have issues with is I might not respond on time, but I respond eventually. And when I say eventually is in less than 3 days to 1 week.
That's actually, I thought you were going to say 2 weeks or
no, I try to keep it in 1 week. I will definitely go. But like at times I see emails, and if you see me don't respond, at times it's because I'm thinking of what to tell you. It's not because I can't respond. Like I feel like you put some effort in sending that email, and I owe it to you to think through it before giving you, a worthwhile feedback. As regards my advice to students, right?
Yes.
I would say that, see, the world is changing fast. A few years ago, traveling abroad to study used to look like going to heaven. Those are uncles who went to Liverpool. You know how they're like, Uncle Sebastian on Liverpool, and we think he's in heaven, like somewhere that is not attainable. Those days are gone. Like the internet has made everything really, really fast and easy. And I feel like, we are not doing enough to take advantage of these things back home in Africa and in Nigeria. And that's something I feel like students need to, like put into consideration. Like that time you are spending on Instagram or Twitter, unless it's your career, on the same internet, you can find opportunities to advance yourself, take short courses, improve your skill set in whatever. Like before, it used to be maybe taking online courses to learn how to code, but now people even learn how to do makeup online, right? People learn how to even cut hair. People learn how, like, there's nothing that you don't find on the internet, So I feel like we don't do a lot to take advantage of that, and that's something that people, should take advantage of. If you want to go to grad school, there are so many resources online. Even just write tips to applying to grad school, and you see people who have written articles about them. Like, put yourself in those spaces, because these are things that would advance you. These days, it's not so much about, whether you are born into a rich home. Like, the mobility across social strata is very fluid, as long as you are willing to put in the work. So my advice would be put in the work. Like, you will be better for it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kenny. You've given us advice from everywhere. And we're really glad to have had you on this podcast. Thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for all the community building that you're doing. Please remember, Mr. Kenny has been so kind to share his email address with us. For people who missed it, it's steven.kene@gmail.com. Remember to clearly ask what you want. Do not dilly-dally.
The Steven is with the PH. People always forget that part.
It's true, yes. Steven with the PH.
Before they say Mr. Kenya did not reply their email. No.
And you sent it to Steven with a V. So please, Steven with a PH. And as always, for the people who are listening, if you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe to our podcast, listen to the newsletter. We try to provide this information in as many formats as possible to meet people where they are. See you